The machinery hums beneath everything you think you know. It's not a conspiracy in the way you've been taught to imagine conspiracies. No shadowy cabal meeting in marble halls. No single architect drawing blueprints for your imprisonment. The truth is far more unsettling, far more total. You are complicit. Every day, with every unremarkable choice, every nod of agreement, every silence where there should have been a scream, you tighten the chains. The world isn't keeping you asleep through force. It's keeping you asleep through your enthusiastic participation, your desperate need to believe that the nightmare is actually a dream worth staying in. Look around at what you call civilization. The buildings, the schedules, the endless conveyor belt of production and consumption. This isn't the natural order of things. This is a manufactured reality, a consensus hallucination so pervasive that questioning it feels like madness. And that's precisely the mechanism of control. The moment you begin to wake up, to see the bars of the cage, everyone around you becomes an agent of your resedation. Not because they're evil, but because your awakening threatens the stability of their own sleep. They need you to keep dreaming the same dream, because your skepticism makes them doubt, and doubt is the crack through which reality might come flooding in. The culture you inhabit is an organism, and like all organisms, its primary directive is survival. It doesn't matter whether that survival serves you. What matters is that it perpetuates itself, and it has discovered the perfect mechanism for doing so. It makes you believe that your submission is your freedom, that your imprisonment is your identity, that your chains are your choices. You wake up, you go to work, you buy things, you watch screens, you form opinions within acceptable parameters, and you tell yourself, this is living. But living is precisely what you're not doing. You're maintaining, you're sustaining, you're being a good cell in the body of a system that has convinced you its health is your health. The brilliant cruelty of it all is that the system doesn't need guards anymore. It outsourced that job to you. Every time you mock someone for being too strange, too intense, too weird, too much, you're doing the work of cultural enforcement. Every time you feel that creeping anxiety about stepping outside the narrow channels of acceptable behavior, you're feeling the internalized jailer. Every time you consume without questioning, work without wondering why, speak without saying anything true, you're voting for your own captivity. The prison doesn't need walls when the prisoners police themselves. And here's what they never tell you in school, in church, in those fluorescent lit rooms where they shape your consciousness like clay. The world you see isn't the world that is. It's a story, a narrative, a collective fiction maintained by billions of people agreeing not to look directly at the sun. Language itself is the bars of the cage, cutting up the seamless fabric of reality into discrete, manageable, tradable pieces. You think you're describing the world when you speak, but you're actually constructing it, and the construction happened long before you arrived. You were born into a linguistic cage, taught to see through its bars and call that sight, taught to think inside its logic and call that thought. The domestication happened slowly. It happened over thousands of years, and it happened again in the first few years of your life. Once, humans moved with the rhythms of nature, ate what the earth provided, dreamed in colors that don't have names anymore. Then something shifted. Agriculture, settlement, the rise of what we proudly call civilization. We stopped following the food and started controlling it. We stopped moving with the seasons and started controlling them. We stopped living in the moment and started building monuments to time itself, calendars, schedules, the tyranny of the clock. And with each step toward control, we lost something wild, something essential, something that knew how to be without needing to become. What replaced it was the ego, the separate self, the individual locked inside its own skull, cut off from the web of being that connects everything to everything else. This is the fundamental lie of your culture, that you are separate, that there is you and then there is the world, that your skin is a boundary rather than a membrane. That consciousness is something you have rather than something you are, something you're swimming in, something that's dreaming you as much as you're dreaming it. The culture needs you to believe in your separateness because separated individuals are manageable, predictable, controllable. United consciousness is revolutionary. Isolated ego is just another consumer. They sold you a story about progress, and you bought it because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. The story goes like this. We were primitive, and now we're advanced. We were ignorant, and now we're enlightened. We were in darkness, and now we're in light. But what if it's the opposite? What if we had something precious, and we traded it for something shiny? What if the indigenous peoples we call primitive actually possessed a sophistication of consciousness that we can barely imagine? What if their superstitions were actually sophisticated technologies of the sacred, and our materialism is the real superstition, the belief that the measurable is all that matters, that the visible is all that's real? You live in a society that has declared war on consciousness itself. Think about it. Every naturally occurring substance that expands awareness, that dissolves the ego, that connects you to something larger, illegal, forbidden, dangerous. But the substances that narrow consciousness, that strengthen the ego, that keep you functioning as a productive unit, those are fine, prescribed even, encouraged. Alcohol to take the edge off your slavery, caffeine to keep you alert within it, pharmaceutical mood stabilizers to ensure you don't get too unstable, too questioning, too awake. The message is clear. The only acceptable states of consciousness are those that keep the machinery running. Your awareness is permitted only insofar as it serves the system. The screens you stare at for hours every day aren't windows to the world. They're walls. They're the bars that have replaced the need for physical barriers. You think you're connected because you can send messages across continents, but you're more isolated than ever. You think you're informed because you have access to information, but information isn't knowledge, and knowledge isn't wisdom. You're drowning in data and starving for meaning. You're swimming in content and dying of thirst for contact. The technology was supposed to liberate you, but it became another mechanism of control, another way to keep you clicking, scrolling, consuming, never quite satisfied, never quite present, always elsewhere, always absent from the only moment that actually exists. And the content itself, the movies, the news, the social media feeds, they're not neutral. They're not just entertainment. They're programming. They're teaching you how to think, what to want, who to be. They're reinforcing the values of the culture, consumption as identity, distraction as lifestyle, surface as substance. They show you 1,000 ways to want and not a single way to be. They fill your imagination with their images, so there's no room for your own. They give you vicarious experience, so you don't seek direct experience. They give you synthetic emotion, so you don't have to feel your real feelings. They give you someone else's life to observe, so you don't have to live your own. The educational system played its part too. It didn't teach you how to think. It taught you what to think. It didn't awaken your curiosity. It channeled it into acceptable forms. It didn't encourage you to question authority. It taught you that authority is what defines truth. You learned to sit still, to raise your hand, to wait for permission, to accept that some questions have answers and other questions shouldn't be asked. You learned that there are experts and there are lay people, and you're the latter, so trust the former. You learned that creativity is something that happens during art class, not something that could restructure your entire relationship to reality. You learned that imagination is child's play, not the most powerful force in the universe. The economic system completes the circle. It ensures your compliance through the most elegant mechanism ever devised: necessity. You need money to survive, and money comes from labor, and labor means selling your time, your energy, your life force to someone who will use it for their purposes, not yours. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, for 40 years if you're lucky. That's not living. That's dying slowly. That's burning up your one precious existence to keep someone else's dream alive while your own dreams atrophy from neglect. And you can't opt out because the system is total. It's not that there are no alternatives. It's that the alternatives have been systematically destroyed, co-opted, or made to seem impossible. But here's the deepest level of the conspiracy, the one that makes it so difficult to resist. You don't just participate in the system, you defend it. When someone criticizes capitalism, you explain why it's the best system we have. When someone questions the value of their job, you tell them they should be grateful to have one. When someone wants to drop out, travel, explore, live differently, you tell them they're being irresponsible, immature, unrealistic. You've internalized the voice of the system so completely that it speaks through you. You've made the jailer's arguments your own. You've become the enforcer of your own imprisonment and everyone else's too. This is what they never tell you about power. It's not just imposed from above. It circulates through everything, including you. It doesn't just constrain you. It produces you. You think your desires are your own, but they were manufactured by forces you can't even see. You think your identity is yours, but it was assembled from cultural components. You think your thoughts are yours, but they're speaking in a language that was already structured before you learned it, carrying assumptions you never chose to accept but absorbed like breathing. The system doesn't need to force you to comply because it already shaped you into someone who wants to comply, who can't even imagine what non-compliance would look like. And yet, something in you knows. Something deeper than your conditioned mind, deeper than your acculturated self, deeper than your fear of judgment and loss and being cast out into the cold. Some part of you has always known that this isn't it, that there's something else, something more, something real beneath all the simulation. That's why you feel that ache sometimes, that emptiness that no amount of consumption can fill. That's why you wake up at 3 a.m. and wonder what you're doing with your life. That's why you look at your reflection sometimes and barely recognize yourself. That's the authentic you, screaming from beneath layers of conditioning, trying to get your attention, trying to wake you up. The culture has 1,000 ways to suppress that voice. Therapy to adjust you to your maladjustment. Medication to smooth out the rough edges of your dissatisfaction. Entertainment to distract you from your existential dread. Spirituality as product to give you the feeling of seeking without the danger of finding. Self-help books that help you become a better version of the person the system needs you to be. Yoga classes that make you flexible enough to bend into whatever shape your employer requires. Meditation apps that calm you down so you can return to your unfulfilling life with equanimity. Every tool of awakening has been co-opted into a tool of improved slumber. The question you have to ask yourself is this: what would it mean to truly wake up? Not to become woke, that shallow performance of awareness that's just another identity to consume, but to actually wake up, to see the world without the filter of conditioning, to experience reality directly, not mediated through screens and concepts and the endless commentary of thought. To remember what it feels like to be a mammal on a planet, a conscious being in a mysterious universe, rather than a consumer in an economy, a user on a platform, a number in a database. Waking up means recognizing that almost everything you've been taught is a lie. Not because your teachers were evil, but because they were teaching you what they were taught, passing down the collective dream like a genetic code, never questioning it, because questioning it would mean admitting they wasted their lives on something hollow. The bitterness of that recognition is too much for most people to bear, so they don't bear it. They bury it. They get angry at anyone who tries to dig it up. They defend the system that's killing them, because accepting its falseness would mean accepting that they've been complicit in their own diminishment. The educational system told you that history is a story of progress, that we're advancing towards something better. But what if we're not progressing? What if we're actually regressing, moving further away from something essential with each technological advance? What if the peak of human consciousness wasn't ahead of us, but behind us, in those ancient cultures that understood themselves to be participants in nature rather than masters of it? What if the Aboriginal Dreamtime was actually a more sophisticated understanding of reality than your science, which can measure everything except what matters most? Meaning, purpose, the felt sense of being alive. They taught you that rational, linear thinking is the highest form of intelligence. That logic and analysis are how you understand the world. But that's only half the story, and it's the half that serves power. Rational thinking is good for building machines and calculating profits and organizing systems of control. But it's terrible at accessing the deeper dimensions of reality, the symbolic, the mythic, the transcendent. Your culture has developed one hemisphere of the collective brain to an extraordinary degree while letting the other hemisphere atrophy. You can think about everything, but you've forgotten how to feel into anything. You can analyze, but you can't intuit. You can compute, but you can't commune. The scientific worldview tells you that the universe is dead matter, operating mechanically, without purpose or consciousness. That you're just a meat robot, a biochemical machine, consciousness an accidental byproduct of neural complexity. That there's nothing beyond the physical, nothing transcendent, nothing sacred. And this belief, this reductionist materialism, is probably the most successful mind virus ever created. It doesn't just explain the world in a certain way. It drains the world of meaning. It takes the living and souled universe that you can feel in your bones when you're not thinking and replaces it with a dead thing to be used, exploited, consumed. But you know better. You felt it. Maybe not recently, maybe not since childhood, but you felt it. That sense that everything is alive, that consciousness isn't just in your head, but everywhere, that the boundary between you and the world is artificial. You felt it in nature when you stopped thinking and just experienced the forest, the ocean, the sky. You felt it in certain moments with other people, when the separateness dissolved and there was just connection, presence, recognition. You felt it in music, in art, in sex, in meditation, in those liminal spaces where the constructed world falls away and something else shows through. The culture works very hard to make sure those moments remain moments, that they don't expand into a sustained alternative consciousness, that you file them away as anomalies, beautiful but not real, not practical, not something to build a life around. You're supposed to have your mystical experience and then return to your desk job. You're supposed to feel connected to everything and then remember you have bills to pay. You're supposed to glimpse the infinite and then get back to your finite concerns. The system can tolerate your brief escapes as long as you return. What it can't tolerate is you deciding to stay escaped. And this is where the real conspiracy becomes visible. It's not that there's a hidden group preventing you from awakening. It's that everyone around you is invested in your sleep because your sleep validates their sleep. The moment you start questioning the fundamental assumptions of the culture, you become dangerous. Not dangerous in a violent sense, but dangerous to the stability of the consensus reality. Your family will worry about you. Your friends will distance themselves. Your employer will find you difficult because you're no longer playing the game, and your refusal to play makes everyone else's playing seem like a choice rather than a necessity. They'll tell you to be realistic. That's the first defense. Be realistic means accept the limitations we've all agreed to accept. It means don't imagine alternatives because alternatives make us uncomfortable. It means get back in line because your freedom threatens our imprisonment. But what's realistic? Is it realistic to spend your life making money you don't need to buy things you don't want to impress people you don't like? Is it realistic to destroy the planet for quarterly profits? Is it realistic to have more depressed, anxious, addicted people than ever in history and call that civilization? Maybe their realism is actually insanity, and your so-called impractical dreams are the only sane response to an insane world. They'll tell you everyone has to work. That's the second defense. As if work, as if wage labor, as if the specific economic arrangement you happen to live under is a law of nature rather than a historical contingency. Humans have lived thousands of different ways. They've organized their societies around thousands of different values. The idea that you must sell your labor to survive, that you must participate in an economy that's eating the world, that there's no alternative. This is recent. This is modern. This is not inevitable. Indigenous peoples worked far fewer hours than you do and had more leisure, more community, more meaning. The agricultural revolution wasn't progress. It was a trap, and you're still in it. They'll tell you that's just how things are. That's the final defense, and it's the most insidious because it masquerades as wisdom. That's just how things are is the death of imagination. It's the surrender of possibility. It's the acceptance that the world can't be different, better, more alive. But things aren't any particular way except the way people make them. Every aspect of your society was constructed by people, most of them dead. and it can be deconstructed and reconstructed by people who are alive. The world is plastic. Reality is negotiable. Everything you think is solid is actually fluid, maintained only by collective agreement and collective forgetting of what came before. So what happens when you stop agreeing? When you withdraw your consent from the consensus? When you refuse to participate in the collective hallucination? The system has a term for this. It calls it mental illness. It calls it maladjustment. It calls it a problem to be solved, medicated, corrected. Because the system can't allow for the possibility that the problem isn't you, it's the system. It can't acknowledge that your depression might be a sane response to a depressing world, that your anxiety might be appropriate given what's happening to the planet, that your sense of meaninglessness might reflect the actual meaninglessness of the life you're being asked to live. But here's the thing they don't want you to realize. Your pain is not pathology. Your discontent is not disease. Your refusal to adjust is not dysfunction. These are signs of health. These are signs that some part of you is still alive, still fighting, still refusing to be completely absorbed into the machine. Your suffering is the friction between your authentic nature and your conditioned behavior. It's the sound of your soul scraping against the cage. And the solution isn't better medication, or better therapy, or better coping mechanisms. The solution is to break the fucking cage. This is where it gets dangerous. Not dangerous to others, but dangerous to the stability of your constructed self. Because once you start seeing the bars, you can't unsee them. Once you start questioning one thing, other things become questionable too. Once you pull one thread, the whole garment starts unraveling. And what's underneath might terrify you. Because underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the stories you tell yourself about who you are, underneath the identity you've built from cultural scraps, there's something vast. There's something wild. There's something that has nothing to do with being a good citizen, a productive worker, a responsible adult. The culture's greatest achievement is making you afraid of that wildness. It taught you that civilization is what separates you from the animals, that control is what makes you human, that your wild nature is something to be tamed, suppressed, transcended. But that's backwards. Your wild nature is your real nature. Your animal self is your authentic self. Everything else is costume, performance, learned behavior. And the reason the culture works so hard to suppress your wildness is because wild things can't be controlled. Wild things don't follow schedules. Wild things don't maximize productivity. Wild things don't consume beyond their needs. Wild things are present, alive, free. You want to know what the system really fears? It fears you sitting still. Not the manufactured stillness of meditation apps, but real stillness. The kind where you stop consuming, stop producing, stop achieving, stop becoming, and just are. Because in that stillness, something else can emerge. Some other way of being that doesn't depend on the system, doesn't support the system, doesn't need the system. The system needs your movement, your striving, your dissatisfaction. It needs you to always want more, be more, do more. It needs you to feel incomplete, so you'll keep consuming, keep working, keep running on the treadmill. Your contentment is revolutionary. Your presence is subversive. Your sufficiency is terrifying to an economy built on manufactured scarcity and engineered desire. They built a world to keep you asleep, yes. But the deeper truth is that they built it from your sleep. Your unconsciousness is the building material. Every unexamined assumption is a brick. Every accepted limitation is a bar. Every swallowed question is mortar. The prison isn't out there, imposed on you. The prison is in you, constructed from internalized beliefs that you've never questioned because everyone around you believes them too. And the scariest part is that you're not just an inmate. You're also the guard, the warden, the architect. You police yourself more effectively than any external authority ever could. But what if you stopped? What if you just stopped? Stopped defending the system that exploits you. Stopped explaining why things have to be this way. Stopped convincing yourself that your dissatisfaction is your personal failing, rather than a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation. What if you stopped participating in your own diminishment? Not in some dramatic way, not by burning everything down, but quietly, internally, by withdrawing your belief in the necessity of it all. This is the revolution that no army can defeat, that no law can prevent, that no surveillance can detect. The revolution of consciousness, the insurrection of presence, the uprising of authenticity against performance, of being against seeming, of truth against consensus. It doesn't require violence because violence is the system's language, the language of domination and control. It requires something much more subversive. It requires you to wake up, to see clearly, to remember who you were before they told you who to be. And who were you? You were a human animal, born on a planet, staring up at stars that have been there for billions of years. You were a temporary arrangement of matter that somehow became conscious, aware, capable of wonder. You were a miracle, an impossible thing, a localized intensification of the universe's ability to know itself. You were not born to make someone else rich. You were not born to spend your days in fluorescent boxes doing tasks that don't matter. You were not born to consume and be consumed. You were born into mystery, and mystery is your birthright, and they stole it from you and replaced it with certainty, with answers, with the shallow satisfactions of a controlled existence. The irony is that they convinced you that their world is the real one, and any alternative is fantasy, escape, impractical dreaming. But their world is the fantasy. Their world of infinite growth on a finite planet, of separation from nature, of consciousness as epiphenomenon, of meaning as social construction. This is the actual fantasy, the collective delusion, the story we're telling ourselves while the real world burns. The alternative isn't escapism. It's returning to what's real, to the felt sense of being alive, to direct experience unmediated by concepts, to the wisdom of the body, the intelligence of the earth, the consciousness that permeates everything. You think you're awake because your eyes are open, but you're dreaming their dream. You think you're free because you can choose between products, between parties, between options they've provided. But those aren't choices. Those are permissions. They give you a menu and call it freedom, but you didn't choose what's on the menu, and you're not allowed to eat anything else. Real freedom would be stepping away from the table entirely. Real freedom would be remembering that you're not a consumer, not a voter, not a user, not a human resource. You're a phenomenon of nature, as natural as a tree or a river, and no one should be able to tell you how to live except the deep intelligence that lives in you, that knows how to be without being taught. But that intelligence has been suppressed, not destroyed. It can't be destroyed because it's what you are, but suppressed, buried under layers of conditioning, trauma, belief, fear. The work of awakening isn't becoming something new. It's excavating what was always there. It's not ascending to some higher plane. It's descending into your own depths, beneath the surface self that society sculpted, down to the bedrock of your being. And what you'll find there isn't what they taught you in church or school or therapy. You won't find sin or dysfunction or lack. You'll find wholeness. You'll find belonging. You'll find that you were never actually separate from everything else. That consciousness isn't in you, but you're in consciousness, swimming in it like a fish in water, unable to see it because you're so completely immersed. This is what the shamanic cultures knew. This is what the mystics of every tradition understood. This is what your culture spent centuries trying to eradicate because it's incompatible with domination, with hierarchy, with control. You can't rule people who know they're part of everything. You can't exploit people who understand that harming others is harming themselves. You can't sell unnecessary products to people who feel complete. You can't convince people to destroy the earth when they know the earth is their body. So the knowing had to be destroyed. The sacred had to be profaned. The direct experience of unity had to be replaced with the concept of God, something out there, separate, mediated by authorities who could tell you what to believe and how to behave. And the authorities did tell you. They told you that the body is shameful, that pleasure is suspect, that your desires are wrong, that you need to be saved from yourself. They told you that you're born broken and need their institutions to fix you. They told you that the earth is here for your use, that animals don't have souls, that plants don't have consciousness, that the whole universe except for humans is basically machinery, stuff to be used. They told you this not because it's true, but because it serves their purposes. Because if you believe you're separate from nature, you won't object when they destroy nature. If you believe you're broken, you'll keep buying their fixes. If you believe you need authorities, you won't trust your own experience. But your experience knows better. Your body knows better. That's why they work so hard to make you distrust your body, to live in your head, to think rather than feel. Because feeling would tell you that something is terribly wrong. Feeling would tell you that spending your life in boxes under artificial light isn't healthy. Feeling would tell you that food engineered in laboratories doesn't nourish you the way food from Earth does. Feeling would tell you that relationships mediated by screens aren't satisfying, that achievements measured by money aren't fulfilling, that progress that leaves you exhausted and anxious isn't progress at all. So you were taught to override your feelings, to push through, to tough it out, to man up, woman up, adult up, to be professional, which means to perform being okay, even when you're not. To be successful, which means to have things you don't have time to enjoy because you're too busy getting more things. To be responsible, which means to do what you're told, even when what you're told is destroying you. And you did it. You learned to ignore your body's signals, to suppress your emotional truth, to distrust your intuitions. You learned to be good instead of real, acceptable instead of authentic, functional instead of fulfilled. And now here you are. Functional but not fulfilled. Successful but not satisfied. Connected but not intimate. Informed but not wise. You have everything the culture promised would make you happy, or you're striving to get it, and either way, you're not happy. Because happiness isn't downstream of achievement. Joy isn't on the other side of more. Peace isn't waiting for you in the future after you've completed all your tasks. These things are here, now, accessible in any moment when you stop performing and start being, when you stop thinking about life and start living it, when you stop trying to get somewhere and realize you're already here. But being here, in the present moment, in your actual life, in your feeling body, this is exactly what the system can't tolerate. Because here, now, present, you don't need anything. You don't need the next product, the next achievement, the next distraction. You're complete. And complete people don't consume. They don't strive. They don't participate in the machinery of endless becoming that keeps the economic engine running. They're threats to the system, not because they're fighting it, but because they're not feeding it. They've withdrawn the fuel of their attention, their desire, their life force. This is why presence is revolutionary. This is why meditation, real meditation, not the kind that makes you a better employee, but the kind that wakes you up to reality, is subversive. This is why psychedelics are illegal, why mystical experience is pathologized, why every door to transcendence is guarded and locked. Because on the other side of those doors is the recognition that you don't need the system, that you never needed it, that it needs you far more than you need it. And if enough people realize this, if enough people withdrew their participation, if enough people simply stopped believing in the necessity of this particular arrangement, the whole thing would collapse. Not into chaos, but into possibility. Not into darkness, but into a different light. The culture tells a story about what happens to people who drop out, who opt out, who refuse to play the game. It tells you they become homeless, useless, lost. It tells you they're failures, cautionary tales, examples of what happens when you don't follow the rules. But what if the actual cautionary tale is different? What if it's about what happens when you do follow the rules? When you sacrifice your aliveness for security, your authenticity for acceptance, your soul for a salary? What if the real tragedy isn't the person who walks away from the system, but the person who stays in it, who looks back at the end of their life and realizes they never actually lived, they just survived, they just performed, they just did what they were told? You get one life. One. Not a dress rehearsal, not a practice run, one actual existence as a conscious being in a mysterious universe. And they convinced you to spend it making them rich, watching their content, buying their products, living their dreams instead of your own. They convinced you that this is normal, natural, the way things have to be. They convinced you so thoroughly that you convince others, that you silence the doubt in your own mind before it can even form into a question. You've become your own thought police, your own resistance suppressor, your own jailer. But the door was never actually locked. You can walk out any time. Not by moving to another country. The system is global now. Not by getting a different job. The problem isn't your particular employment, but the whole logic of employment. Not by consuming better products. Ethical consumption is still consumption. You walk out by seeing through it, by recognizing the arbitrary nature of the rules you're following, by remembering that culture is something humans make, and humans can make it differently, by reconnecting with the part of you that existed before socialization, before language, before name and story and identity. That part of you is still there. It's there when you stop talking, stop thinking, stop trying to figure everything out. It's there in the silence between thoughts. It's there in the gap between stimulus and response. It's there in the felt sense of being alive that precedes all concepts of who you're supposed to be. This is your original nature. Not original sin, but original innocence. Not something that needs to be fixed, but something that needs to be remembered. Not something small and separate and scared, but something vast and connected and fearless. The journey back to that nature isn't about adding more knowledge, more practice, more achievement. It's about subtraction, about removing the layers that obscure what's already present, about unlearning what you were taught, about deprogramming the software that's running your life without your conscious consent, about seeing through the beliefs that shape your perception and recognizing them as beliefs, not facts, about questioning everything you think you know until you arrive at what you actually know, which is very little, which is just this. You exist, you're aware, and it's mysterious. From that not knowing, from that humility, from that openness, that's where real intelligence emerges. Not the intelligence that memorizes information and passes tests, but the intelligence that responds creatively to what's actually happening. Not the intelligence that follows rules, but the intelligence that invents new games. Not the intelligence that serves power, but the intelligence that serves life. This intelligence isn't in your head. It's in your body, in your intuition, in your connection to something larger than your individual self. The indigenous peoples who your culture called savages and primitives possessed this intelligence. They could read the forest like you read your phone screen. They could find water, track animals, predict weather, heal with plants, because they were paying attention, not thinking about nature, but perceiving it directly, participating in it, understanding themselves as part of it, rather than apart from it. They didn't need to dominate the earth, because they knew domination is the wrong relationship. They didn't need to own land, because they understood that you can't own what you belong to. They didn't need constant entertainment, because they were already entertained by the inexhaustible complexity of the living world. Then civilization arrived with its guns and diseases and certainties. It killed most of them and domesticated the rest. It destroyed their cultures and called it progress. It took their children and reprogrammed them and called it education. It forced them into the machine of modernity and called it helping. And a few generations later, their descendants are like you, cut off from their roots, severed from their traditions, trying to remember something they can feel but can't name, something that their genes remember even though their minds have forgotten. This is the real genocide. Not just the physical killing, though that was horrific enough, but the killing of consciousness, the murder of alternative ways of being, the erasure of possibilities. Because each culture that dies takes with it knowledge that can't be recovered. Not just practical knowledge about plants and animals, but sophisticated understandings of human consciousness, of how to live together, of how to maintain harmony with the earth. Your culture pretends it knows everything worth knowing, but what it knows is how to build machines and make profits and organize systems of control. What it doesn't know is how to be happy, how to be sane, how to be sustainable. And it refuses to learn from the cultures that did know these things, because learning from them would mean admitting that the civilized are actually the savages, destroying their own habitat, consuming their children's future for present convenience. Look at what your civilization has accomplished. You've split the atom and can't split your time fairly. You've mapped the genome and can't map a path to justice. You've reached the moon and can't reach across the divisions you've created. You've built artificial intelligence and lost your natural intelligence. You've connected everyone and left everyone isolated. You've increased the speed of everything and lost the stillness where wisdom lives. You've conquered nature and enslaved yourselves. You call this progress because the alternative, that you've gone terribly wrong somewhere, that you're moving faster and faster in the wrong direction, is too awful to contemplate. But it's not too late. It's never too late while you're still breathing. You can't undo the past, can't bring back the destroyed cultures, can't unknow what's been learned. But you can stop. You can choose differently right now. You can refuse to continue down a path that obviously leads nowhere good. You can remember that you're not your culture, not your conditioning, not your programming. You're something older and newer and truer than any of that. You're a conscious being having a temporary experience in a temporary form, and nothing has authority over you except what you grant authority to. So what authority do you grant? To money. It's invented, arbitrary, maintained by collective agreement. To government. It's people who convinced other people to obey them. To science. It's one method among many for knowing, useful for certain things, useless for others. To religion. It's someone else's experience codified into doctrine. To your own thoughts. They're mostly just recycled culture, internalized voices, conditioned responses. To your feelings. Closer, but they can be manipulated, triggered, hijacked. What's left when you strip away all these false authorities? Awareness itself. The consciousness that's aware of thoughts, feelings, sensations, experiences. The awareness that was there before you learned language, before you were given a name, before you knew yourself as separate. This awareness isn't personal. It doesn't belong to you. You belong to it. It's the space in which everything appears, your body, your thoughts, your entire life. And it's the same awareness that's reading these words right now, the same awareness that's been present your entire life, unchanging while everything else changes, untouched while everything else is touched, free while everything else is conditioned. This is what every spiritual tradition, at its core, is pointing toward. Not God in the sky, not heaven after death, not enlightenment in the future, but this awareness, this presence, this moment, already free, already whole, already enough. The spiritual search is a cosmic joke, because what you're seeking is what's seeking. What you're trying to find is what's looking. What you're trying to become is what you already are. The only thing in the way is the searching itself, the becoming itself, the trying itself. But the culture can't tell you this, because if you realized you're already complete, you'd stop consuming. If you realized you're already home, you'd stop traveling their prescribed paths. If you realized you're already worthy, you'd stop trying to earn worth through achievement. If you realized you're already connected to everything, you'd stop trying to connect through their technologies. The whole economic system depends on your sense of lack, your feeling of incompleteness, your desperate hope that the next thing will finally fill the void. But the void can't be filled from outside because it's not actually empty. The void is space, is openness, is the nothing from which everything arises. The void is pregnant with possibility. The void is the womb of creation. The void is what allows anything to exist. Your culture taught you to fear it, to fill it, to avoid it at all costs. But what if you turned toward it instead? What if you stopped running and just sat with the emptiness, the uncertainty, the not knowing? What if you discovered that the void is actually fullness, that emptiness is actually completion, that nothing is actually everything? This is meditation. Not the technique you learn in an app, but the reality you discover when you stop. Stop running, stop seeking, stop becoming, stop improving, stop trying to get anywhere or be anything. Just stop. And in that stopping, something else emerges. Not something new, but something that was always there, obscured by all your movement. Call it presence, call it being, call it consciousness, call it whatever you want. Names don't matter. What matters is the direct recognition of what you are beyond all names and forms and stories. And from that recognition, everything changes. Not because you change things, but because you see things as they are. You see that the emperor has no clothes, that the system has no foundation, that the whole structure is maintained only by collective belief. You see that you've been hypnotized, and you can dehypnotize yourself. You see that you've been enslaved, and you hold the key. You see that you've been asleep, and you can wake up. Not someday, not after you've fixed yourself, or found the right teacher, or done the practices. Now, this moment, this breath, this awareness that's already awake, already free, already home. But waking up is just the beginning, because then you have to decide what to do with your wakefulness. Do you go back to sleep, pretend you didn't see what you saw, return to the comfort of consensus reality? That's what most people do. The glimpse is too destabilizing, too threatening to their constructed life. So they file it away as an interesting experience and go back to business as usual. Or do you stay awake? Do you let the recognition burn through your entire life, destroying everything that's false, exposing everything that's pretending to be real? Staying awake is harder than waking up, because now you see the bars of the cage, but you're still in the cage. Now you know the dream is a dream, but everyone around you insists it's real. Now you've tasted freedom, but you're still embedded in systems of control. Now you have to navigate a world that's designed for sleeping people while being awake. You have to speak a language that obscures truth while trying to communicate truth. You have to participate in a society that's insane while maintaining your sanity. You have to live in a culture that's dying while cultivating life. This is the razor's edge. This is the path that few people walk because it's so difficult, so isolating, so completely unsupported by the surrounding culture. You're not just going against the current. You're swimming in the opposite direction, while everyone else tells you you're wrong, you're crazy, you're going to drown. And maybe you are. Maybe the attempt to live authentically in an inauthentic world is a form of madness. But maybe the real madness is pretending that a sick society is healthy, that a destructive culture is sustainable, that your alienation is normal. You have to decide for yourself. No one can decide for you. And that's part of the awakening too, realizing that there are no authorities, no one who knows better than you what you should do with your life. The teachers, the gurus, the experts, they can point, but you have to walk. They can describe the territory, but you have to explore it. They can tell you water is wet, but you have to get in the ocean. And ultimately, their maps might not work for your territory. Their paths might not be your path. You have to find your own way, make your own mistakes, discover your own truth. This is terrifying for people who've been conditioned to follow instructions, to seek approval, to do what they're told. The freedom to choose your own path comes with the responsibility for your choices, and most people would rather surrender that responsibility to an authority. It's easier, it's safer. If things go wrong, you can blame someone else. But it's also smaller, it's also deader, it's also a betrayal of your one precious life, your one opportunity to discover what you're capable of, who you actually are beneath all the programming. So what do you do with your wakefulness? Do you try to wake others? This is the first impulse, and it's often a disaster, because people don't wake up when you shake them. They just get angry at you for disturbing their sleep. They defend their dreams more fiercely the more you question them. And you can't wake someone up who doesn't want to be awake. You can't force consciousness. You can't argue someone into enlightenment. All you can do is be awake yourself, live authentically yourself, embody the alternative yourself, and maybe, someone will see you and remember that they too could wake up. Do you drop out entirely? Move to the woods, build a cabin, disconnect from the whole sick system. This is appealing, and for some people it's the right move. But for most, it's not actually freedom. It's just a different kind of cage, self-imposed this time. And it's abandoning everyone else to the system you've escaped. There's something selfish about individual salvation when the whole world is burning. Your awakening isn't complete if it's only for yourself. At some point, it has to become about service, about contribution, about using your clarity to help others find theirs? Do you infiltrate the system, work within it to change it? This is the reformist path, and it has its own dangers. Because the system is very good at co-opting resistance, at turning revolutionaries into functionaries, at absorbing dissent and neutralizing it. You go in thinking you'll change the system, and the system changes you. You compromise a little here, a little there, and before you know it, you're defending things you once opposed, explaining why the change you wanted isn't practical, isn't realistic, isn't possible right now. You become the voice of gradualism, of incremental improvement, of working within existing structures that you know are fundamentally broken. Maybe the answer isn't any of these pure options. Maybe it's some hybrid, some both and rather than either or. Maybe you work within the system where that's useful while maintaining your awareness that it's a system, a construction, not reality itself. Maybe you live in the world but not of it, participating where participation serves life while refusing to participate in what serves death. Maybe you're in the marketplace but not controlled by market logic, in the empire but not serving imperial purposes, in the culture but not defined by cultural values. This requires incredible discernment. This requires constant vigilance. This requires you to keep waking up again and again because the tendency to fall back asleep is always there. The pull of consensus reality is strong. The comfort of conformity is seductive. The path of least resistance leads right back to where you started. You have to actively, deliberately choose differently, moment by moment, day by day, knowing that you'll fail sometimes, that you'll forget sometimes, that you'll get pulled back into the dream sometimes. But you keep choosing, keep remembering, keep returning to what's real. And what is real? Not the constructed reality of culture, but the direct experience of being alive, the taste of food, the feeling of air, the light through leaves, the warmth of touch, the recognition in another's eyes. These simple things that require nothing, cost nothing, depend on nothing except your presence. These moments when you're not trying to get somewhere else, not thinking about past or future, not performing for anyone, not achieving anything. Just here, just now, just this. The whole spiritual path, in the end, is about becoming simple enough to appreciate what's always been here. But this simplicity terrifies the complex self you've built. That self has invested so much in becoming sophisticated, knowledgeable, special. That self has worked so hard to be someone impressive, someone important, someone worth paying attention to. And now you're saying that all of that is unnecessary, that you could drop the whole performance and just be, that who you are without the story is actually more interesting, more alive, more real than who you pretend to be. The ego can't accept this, so it will fight your awakening every step of the way. The ego is not your enemy. It's just a structure, a useful tool for navigating the world, but not who you are. The problem comes when you identify with it, when you think the ego's survival is your survival, when you defend its constructions as if they're protecting something essential. But they're not. You can lose your identity, your story, your entire sense of self, and what you actually are remains untouched. This is what dying before you die means, seeing through the ego's fear of death and recognizing that death is only death for the constructed self, not for consciousness itself. Does consciousness survive death? No one alive can tell you for certain. But does it matter? You're conscious now. That's the miracle. That's the mystery. That's the gift. Whether this consciousness continues after the body fails or not doesn't change the fact that right now, in this moment, awareness is present, experience is happening, life is living itself through you. This moment is all you ever have. The future never comes. When it arrives, it's now. The past is gone. It exists only as memory in this present. Everything happens now. Everything has always happened now. Everything will only ever happen now. This eternal now is what the system tries to steal from you. It keeps you thinking about the future, your goals, your plans, your fears, your hopes. It keeps you dwelling on the past, your regrets, your traumas, your achievements, your failures. It keeps you anywhere but here, anytime but now, because here and now, you don't need what it's selling. Here and now, you're already complete. Here and now, life is already happening, and you're already part of it, and that's already enough. But enough isn't profitable. Completion doesn't consume. Presence doesn't participate in the machinery of desire and lack that drives the economy. So you're taught to never be satisfied, to always want more, to look forward to the next thing while diminishing the current thing. You're taught to document your experiences rather than experience them, to curate your life for others rather than live it for yourself, to perform happiness rather than feel it, to chase peak experiences rather than appreciate ordinary moments. And yet, the ordinary is extraordinary when you actually pay attention to it. The way light moves, the way sound carries, the way breath happens without you doing anything, the way your heart beats 70 times a minute, 100,000 times a day, billions of times in a life, without you ever having to think about it. The way trillions of cells coordinate their activity to create the experience you call yourself. The way atoms that were forged in stars have come together to create eyes that can see stars. The way the universe has organized itself into a pattern that can know itself. And you're that pattern. You're that knowing. This is the perspective that changes everything. When you see yourself not as a separate individual struggling through a hostile world, but as a temporary expression of an intelligent universe exploring itself, experiencing itself, knowing itself through your particular form. You're not in the universe. The universe is expressing itself as you. The same creativity that makes galaxies and ecosystems and weather patterns is making your thoughts, your feelings, your life. You're not an accident. You're not a mistake. You're exactly what's supposed to be happening right now in this particular location, in space and time. Does that mean everything is perfect? No. There's real suffering, real injustice, real harm being done. But that's also part of the pattern. The universe isn't just creation, it's also destruction. Not just birth, but also death. Not just harmony, but also discord. The darkness is as necessary as the light. The falling apart is as essential as the coming together. You can't have complexity without chaos. You can't have consciousness without conflict. You can't have freedom without the possibility of harm. This doesn't justify cruelty or excuse exploitation. It doesn't mean you should accept injustice or ignore suffering. It means you respond to what's happening from a place of understanding rather than a place of fragmentation. You work to reduce harm while recognizing that some harm is inevitable in a dynamic system. You create justice while knowing that perfect justice is impossible in an imperfect world. You increase consciousness while accepting that unconsciousness is also part of the process. You hold the paradox. You embrace the complexity. You dance with the chaos while creating what patterns of order you can. This is mature spirituality. Not the spirituality that pretends everything is love and light, that denies the reality of evil, that bypasses difficulty with positive thinking, but the spirituality that faces what is, all of it, the beautiful and the terrible, and remains present anyway. The spirituality that doesn't need reality to be different than it is before it can be at peace. The spirituality that finds freedom within conditions, not through escape from conditions. The spirituality that says yes to life, all of life, even the parts that hurt. They built a world to keep you asleep, and you helped them. You helped them by believing their story. You helped them by accepting their values. You helped them by participating in their systems. You helped them by silencing your own doubt. You helped them by suppressing your own wildness. You helped them by performing their version of success. You helped them by teaching their lessons to your children. You helped them by enforcing their rules on yourself and others. You helped them every single day in 1,000 unconscious ways. But here's the truth they never wanted you to discover. You can stop helping them. Right now, this moment. You can withdraw your belief, your participation, your consent. You can reclaim your consciousness from the systems that colonized it. You can remember what you knew before they taught you to forget. You can wake up from the dream they told you was life and discover what life actually is when you're living it, rather than narrating it, experiencing it, rather than documenting it, being it, rather than thinking about it. The revolution isn't coming. The revolution is now. It's happening in your consciousness, or it's not happening at all. It's not about overthrowing governments or smashing systems. Those things might need to happen, but they're symptoms, not causes. The real revolution is the one that happens inside, the one where you stop believing in the necessity of your own imprisonment, where you recognize that the cage has always been unlocked, where you remember that you're not a separate self, struggling through a hostile world, but an expression of an intelligent cosmos that's entirely on your side because you're not separate from it. This changes how you move through the world, not because you have a new philosophy or ideology, but because you see differently. You see the game being played and you stop playing it. You see the dream being dreamed and you stop dreaming it. You see the story being told and you stop believing it. Not with anger or bitterness, but with clarity and compassion. Because everyone else is still asleep and they're suffering in their sleep, and your judgment doesn't help them. Your awakening might, though. Your freedom might remind them of theirs. Your authenticity might give them permission to be authentic. Your refusal to play might help them see that the game is optional. But don't expect gratitude. Don't expect understanding. Don't expect anyone to thank you for waking up. Most people will resist your transformation because it threatens theirs. Your freedom makes their bondage visible. Your truth makes their pretending obvious. Your presence makes their absence uncomfortable. They'll say you've changed, and they'll mean it as criticism. They'll say you're not yourself, and they'll be right. You're not the self they wanted you to be. They'll say you're going through a phase, having a crisis, losing your way. And maybe you are. Maybe falling apart is how you fall together. Maybe losing your way is how you find it. Maybe the crisis is exactly what was needed. So you walk the edge, between the world you've left and the world you haven't quite arrived at, between who you were and who you're becoming, between the dream and the awakening. And it's lonely sometimes, because you can't go back and you can't fully forward. You're in the liminal space, the threshold, the doorway between worlds. But this is also where transformation happens. Not in the old world, not in the new world, but in the space between them, in the uncertainty, in the not knowing, in the fertile void where anything is possible. And slowly, gradually, imperceptibly, you notice something. You're not alone here. There are others in this space. They found their own way here, following their own path, but they arrived at the same threshold. And when you meet each other, there's recognition. Not agreement on all things, not shared beliefs or common ideology, but shared commitment to truth, to authenticity, to wakefulness. You don't need to explain yourself to these people. They already understand. They've taken the same leap you took. They've faced the same abyss you faced. They've chosen the same thing you chose. Life over death, truth over comfort, freedom over security. This is the beginning of the new world. Not some utopian future where everything is perfect, but a present moment reality where some people are living authentically while the old world dies around them. They're not waiting for permission or for the right conditions or for enough people to join them. They're just living differently, right now, with what they have, where they are. They're growing their own food while others eat processed poison. They're creating their own meaning while others consume manufactured content. They're connecting face to face while others interact through screens. They're living in their bodies while others live in their heads. They're present while others are absent. They're awake while others are asleep. And their wakefulness is contagious. Not because they're proselytizing or trying to convert anyone, but because aliveness attracts, truth attracts, authenticity attracts, freedom attracts. People feel it even if they can't name it. They sense that something's different about you, something real, something they've been hungry for without knowing it. And some of them will be ready to hear what you're not even saying, what you're just being. And they'll start to wake up too. Not because you woke them up, but because your wakefulness reminded them that waking up is possible. This is how the new world emerges. Not through revolution in the streets, though that might happen too. not through political change, though that might follow, but through each person choosing to wake up, to live authentically, to refuse to participate in their own diminishment. And as more people make that choice, the old world loses power. Not because it's defeated, but because it's abandoned. Not because it's overthrown, but because it's outgrown. Not because it's destroyed, but because it's simply no longer relevant to people who've discovered a better way to live. They built a world to keep you asleep, and you helped them. But now you know. Now you see. Now you understand how it works, and why it works, and what it costs. And you get to choose. Every moment, you get to choose. Sleep or wakefulness. Dream or reality. Their story or your experience. Their world or your life. The choice is always yours, has always been yours, will always be yours. They can pressure you, influence you, persuade you, but they can't choose for you. Only you can do that. So what do you choose? What are you choosing right now, in this moment, as you read these words? Are you choosing to keep sleeping, to return to consensus reality, to pretend you didn't see what you just saw? That's fine. That's your right. There's no judgment here. Sleep has its purposes too. Or are you choosing to stay awake, to see clearly, to live authentically, even though it's harder, lonelier, more uncertain? That's fine too. That's also your right. And maybe that's the choice that changes everything. Because they built a world to keep you asleep. And you helped them. But you can stop helping them. You can start helping yourself instead. You can start living your life instead of the life they designed for you. You can start being yourself instead of who they told you to be. You can start now. You can start here. You can start with this breath, this moment, this choice to be present to what is, rather than lost in what you think should be. The world doesn't need more people who are successful by conventional standards. It doesn't need more people who are productive, efficient, optimized. It needs people who are awake, people who are alive, people who are real, people who've stopped performing and started being, people who've stopped consuming and started creating, people who've stopped following and started exploring, people who've stopped believing and started knowing, people who've stopped sleeping and started waking up. Maybe you're one of those people. Maybe that's why these words found you, or you found these words. Maybe it's time to stop helping them keep you asleep. Maybe it's time to wake up. The question is, are you ready?